So, music. Who do we have for music?
Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga, exactly. Lady Gaga. Interesting music, interesting costumes. You can talk about her costumes in great detail. You know, a meat dress. Whoever thought about it? All of her hats, all of her various stage personas, and the fact that you know, she's a proselytizer for equal rights among genders of all types. So very egalitarian. And did she have to overcome obstacles? Yes, all musical artists have to do what? They all have to overcome obstacles, meet challenges to achieve success. It's just a basic paradigm. So Lady Gaga, who else? Tupac. Now we can go straight with Tupac. Here's one of the great rappers of all time that took the African American experience and idealized it to a whole generation of young African Americans and rappers. And unfortunately, he met a tragic death, but his words and music live on. One of my students used Tupac and quoted some of his lyrics. It's always good when you're doing music, you can quote lyrics, add more detail. I think he used changes. All I see is racist faces. Misplaced hate makes disgrace a racist. You know? Quote the person you're going to use for your musical content example, and that'll add more detail and more authenticity to your SAT content example. Anybody else? Elvis. Here's a poor southern truck driver who turned the music world on his head. You know, took rockabilly, took rock and roll, fused them together, and set a whole generation of musicians on the track to success. Anybody else?
Bob
Dylan. Wonderful. Lots of lyrics that you can use. And here's a guy that, once again, has all kinds of drama in his life and lots of lyrics to choose from. Okay, so we've got music, we've got movies. What else? Let's do sports. Is sports something we can use for our SAT essay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. These are all things that you can use. That's one of the key points to my methodology is you can pick and choose content examples across the board from any pop culture context, from history, from literature. What's the key point? The key point is just that they have to have drama. As long as they have drama, you can spin them to whatever prompt comes up. So sports figures, do we have any?
Oh yeah, Hope Solo.
Hope Solo, exactly. And key figure in women's soccer, and the women's soccer team itself overcame great obstacles to achieve the success they did. Anybody else?
Billy Bean.
Billy Bean from the Oakland A's.
It's also a movie too.
It's also a movie, exactly. So you can see the movie and wrap it up into a paragraph in sports. Billy Bean revolutionized the way baseball players were being analyzed and evaluated, with some help from Nate Silver. Anybody else?
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps, again, great Olympian. Michael Phelps. So all of these sports figures, everybody in sports had to do what? They had to overcome obstacles, meet challenges, achieve success, either individual, group, or both. Okay, so we got sports, so we can keep going with these, all right? But you see the way this paradigm is established here. We can use any of these examples, and you should always have 4 or 5 in your bag of tricks prepared for the SAT essay, and bring them out and utilize them to support whatever prompt the College Board throws at you. One more, very important, personal experience. Everybody has a personal experience. So you can always wrap up one paragraph with personal experience. And you know, the personal experience could even cross over here. You could be a musician, you could be a sports individual. Like Charlie, you were an athlete in water polo. So you probably got a lot of personal experiences where you had to overcome obstacles and meet challenges and help the team succeed, right?
Yep.
So personal experience. And you guys, even if you haven't been a member of a team, even if you haven't been a top water polo candidate, you too can make up your own personal experience. True or false, your personal experience has to be real.
True.
No, it doesn't have to be real. This is a writing test.
It doesn't have to be real?
It doesn't have to be real. This is a key point. This is a writing test. It's not a history test. It's not a literature test. It's not a fact-based test. It's about how well you can take your thoughts and express them in written terms and impress the readers with a solid, well-constructed, well-supported essay. And these are the ways you support it. So, personal experience. If you're not an athlete, you can make up a story about yourself as an athlete. But what do you want to do when you make up that kind of story? You have to have the key components of good writing. It's writing, not facts, that matter. And what are the key components of good writing? Flash vocab, transitions, structure, and the S word, subordination. Mark of a good writer: subordination, transitions, structure, flash vocab, and then of course content examples with what? Details, details, details. The more details, the better. So personal experience. Water polo. Anybody else have any personal experiences, real or imagined? Anybody take a trip over the summer to Nairobi, Kenya to work in an AIDS orphanage?
I did.
Sarah did. She just did now, exactly. And you can talk about the obstacles you had to overcome, the challenges that you met, and the progress that ensued over for the African children.
Yeah.
Now, this is perfectly legit. It's a writing test, and you don't have access to a lot of external information while you're writing, but you do have access to your imagination. And my friend behind me, Einstein, said famously, imagination is more important than knowledge. And that's one of the key things you want to keep in mind when you're writing your essay. You don't have to worry about being historically accurate or factually exact. It's a writing test. It's not a test of facts. So you can use all of these things, and if you don't remember exactly what happened in the Scarlet Letter, can you make the story up as you go along?
Yeah.
Absolutely. This may seem heresy to some people, but it's a writing test. They're testing your ability to write and express yourself. So you don't have to be trapped by content. You don't have to be trapped by facts or historical accuracy. If you don't remember something, you can just make it up as you go along. And we'll see that in more detail when we look at our sample essay, which will be coming up next. So I'm talking about personal experience, sports, music, movies, history, trash novels, literature, and how facts really don't matter. Jason.
Wait, you mean you can really just make up anything you want?
You can. You can actually make up anything you want.
If you know a person who was famous but you don't remember their name, can you make that up too, or can you?
Absolutely, absolutely. You should never stop because you can't remember somebody's name or a date or a place, because you've got 25 minutes to pour out your heart in this SAT essay, and you just don't have time to stop and think. So when you come across something like that, you just fill in the blank with somebody whose name you can make up, or a date you can make up, or a place you can make up. In the real world, if you were at a computer or at home, you'd have resource materials, you'd have access to the internet, you would be able to find exactly what you were looking for: names, dates, places, whatever. But you're in a little room with no access to external events, so you have to write as if you had access to all of this information. And where is that information stored? It's in your head. It's your imagination. So just like lawyers can make up laws to support their arguments on the bar, you guys can make up facts to support your thesis on the SAT essay. Another example of this is in public speaking, where public speakers are told that they can, impromptu speaking, they can make up whatever kind of activities or facts or events that they want. You can even make up personal experience stories. For example, you could talk about how your brother was a crack dealer on the streets of San Francisco and how you helped him get into a halfway house and overcome his addictions. Or you could talk about how you're a football player and one day your coach had a heart attack on the football field and you performed CPR to bring him back so that he could live again and coach for another day. All of these are possible. I even had one student that wrote about a Polish author, about a novel that a Polish author had written, and the novel didn't exist, nor did the Polish author. What was the point? The point was to show her writing ability to support a prompt. That's what this test is all about. Not about historical facts, not about inaccuracies, just about writing. So keep that in mind, because that will keep the pencil moving and allow you to get through 2 pages of terrifying white space without stopping and obtain a top scoring essay. So before we move on, there's one more category for content examples that I want to include, and that's to bring it up to date and make it modern. technology. So do we know any people from technology that would be interesting to include on your SAT essay?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, of course, the founder and visionary of Apple, and the producer of all the devices that you guys use for communication these days. iPads, iPhones, computers, and whatnot. Anybody else?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg, of course, Facebook. What could be more relevant technologically than Facebook, which you guys use probably too much every day. So yeah, Bill Gates is another one. So technology is also something that you could use for your SAT essay. Just incorporate some paragraph about Jobs or Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whomever, and use it to support your thesis. Why? Because all of these individuals have done what? Overcome obstacles, met challenges, achieved progress. Individual, social, or both. Now, let's go back to our rules of engagement. This was number 6, content examples. And so far we talked about the thesis, structure, transitions, flash vocab, subordination, and content examples. These are the mix and match things you need to be able to qualitatively deliver a top scoring essay. But how many rules of engagement, how many criteria did I mention the readers are going to be applying to your essay? 7, and we've already done 6. Now these 6 are all things that every good essay reader will be looking for, and they're all qualitative points. But unfortunately, number 7 has nothing to do with quality, but everything to do with success in the essay. It's entirely quantitative, which means what?
Numbers.
Length and numbers. So, and this may be, unfortunately, the most important characteristic of your writing. If you don't write an essay that fills up both pages with small writing completely, you may not get a top score, no matter how good the writing is itself. It's not fair, it's not just, it's not right, but that's the way it works. So I mentioned earlier that when we have these 2 pages of terrifying white space, we have to fill them up voluminously, not just with good writing, but also with a lot of words. More words the better. And that does kind of correspond to one of the principles of good writing, which is details, details, details. More details the better. More authentic your paragraph will sound. But really it comes down to just a quantitative assessment. If you have 8 words per line, you're going to end up with 400 words, which is good. It'll get you a 10, a 9, 10, maybe even 11. But if you want to ensure that you've got an 11 or 12, you've got to hit the 450 word mark. So length really matters. And it shouldn't on an SAT essay, but that's just human nature. The readers will look at your essay and give an impression just from your word count of what quality your writing style is. So it's very important to write small and cover both pages and all the lines. Once again, if you want a 10, got to have 400. If you want an 11 or a 12, you got to have 450. I've had students that have done really excellent essays. Lots of subordination, great writing style, excellent content examples, wonderful structure and transitions, and they've had 350 words and they've gotten 8s. So you have to think about this. Word count matters. So, as I said, I'm teaching you not just to write well, but also to write fast, small, and voluminously. Yes?
I'm guessing handwriting is important.
It really isn't. It isn't that important. The readers cut you a lot of slack with handwriting. I've had some students with terrible handwriting, and I was worried about what kind of scores they'd get, but the readers will persevere through bad handwriting. They cut you some slack in that area. So those are the 7 rules of engagement. And before we leave those and look at a sample essay, let me just point out, because a lot of people say, well, Tom, I don't know where I'm going to get my content example. I see where you've got it there, but I'd like to see some examples of how some other people have utilized these content examples so I can use those as a springboard to bounce off of and incorporate into my own. Well, it turns out that chapter 7 of my book, called Details, 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 has 40 pages of content examples, just like we talked about here, in literature, movies, music, technology, history, sports, and whatever. And they're all organized by genre. We've got a whole section on literature, a whole section on history, a whole section on sports, personal experience, technology, and so on. Now this chapter is like 40 pages, full of real content examples from real students that have taken my course. And it's not a sit-down dinner, it's a buffet. You can kind of walk through it, pick and choose what content examples you want to utilize, and then bank on those to create your own. Nothing better than seeing how somebody else has done something once successfully to be able to model your own work on that person's ideas and then make them your own.